Welcome to worship with the Unitarian Universalist community of Charlotte. I'm Eve Stevens, one of the ministers of this congregation. Even in non-pandemic times, Thanksgiving is always an emotionally complex experience. It can be a lonely time, feeling isolated while others are gathering. Then there's the stress of sitting down with a relative who refuses to use your correct pronouns, disagreeing politically, religiously, philosophically. Sometimes there's grief, painfully aware of who will not be at the table this year. There are plenty of warm memories too. Sharing a festive meal with people we love, a favorite pie recipe made for the 46th time. This year, of course, there's the anxiety of whether to gather at all, how to gather safely, when we feel our need for one another most profoundly. Thanksgiving this year is another painful reminder that even the most routine and familiar comforts are not guaranteed this year. And of course, for our spiritual community, there's no getting around the whitewashing of the violence and brutality of our origin story as a country. Liz Jacola is a member of the Fond du Lac Band of Lake Superior, Chippewa. She shared with the New York Times this week a revelatory experience from her childhood. She was watching the film Addams Family Values, featuring familiar Addams Family characters. Jacola recounts the scene that grabbed her attention. The Addams' daughter, Wednesday, is playing the role of Pocahontas in a children's Thanksgiving Day play. Wednesday, Pocahontas, goes off script and takes violent revenge on the Pilgrims, saying, "You have taken the land which is rightfully ours. Years from now, my people will be forced to live in mobile homes on reservations. Your people will wear cardigans and drink highballs." Jacola remembers watching that scene for the first time and feeling stunned, amazed that people beyond her Chippewa family and friends knew the real story, and amazed further still that everyone still carries on as if they don't. Thanksgiving is a quintessential American holiday, deeply interwoven with our national psyche. Our board's call to action clearly reads that our commitment to spiritual, societal, environmental transformation requires that we seek out opportunities to listen to people and ideas that may expand the comfort zones that surround even our worthiest habits and traditions. What tradition could be worthier than sharing a meal with loved ones? What legacy could be more fraught? Welcome, members and guests. I invite you to head to our public Facebook page to greet one another in real time.
When we are singing, we are bound together. When we are sharing,
We gather together in this community, the community of the Unitarian Universalist community of Charlotte. We take time from our busy lives to focus on what's important to us and what we are thankful for. This is a community of open hearts and open minds.
I want to add a special welcome to our children this morning, joining us before you head off to your virtual classes. And in a moment, we will get to hear the children's choir singing, after which you'll head to class. But first, I want to ask you to think for a moment about a funny question. What does belonging taste like to you? What does belonging taste like? Belonging is feeling at home with others, feeling welcome, knowing that you are wanted here, that you are loved just as you are. Maybe for you, belonging tastes like cinnamon or curry. It might taste like pizza with extra cheese or warm banana bread fresh out of the oven. For me, belonging tastes like tortellini, plain without any sauce, ready in about 10 minutes, eaten with my fingers. It's one of my family's comfort foods. I can remember eating it with my family lots of times. What does belonging taste like for you? Feeling welcome, knowing that you are loved just as you are. I know this is a strange year all the way around. Whatever your plans are for Thanksgiving, even if it doesn't look the way it usually does, make sure you plan to get a taste of belonging with people you love.
Let us
If it were not a pandemic year, any other year, my family would sit down to share the Thanksgiving meal around 3 p.m. Before that, we nibble from a relish plate that includes black olives, carrot sticks, and both sweet and dill pickles. There are a few dishes that have continued to make it to the table year after year. Green bean casserole, my grandpa's gravy, and cranberries in 2 different forms. Reduced on the stove with sugar, then cooled with slices of celery added. And the gelatinous canned variety sitting on a plate holding the shape of the can that it came in. My family's Thanksgiving tradition dates back to 1955, when my maternal grandpa invited his Army friend and his wife over for Thanksgiving dinner. Our 2 families have shared Thanksgiving ever since. Family of choice, I refer to them now as aunts and cousins. When this tradition began, my grandparents and this couple had similar religious and political views. Their descendants, not so much. We have different understandings of human sexuality, of the role of the Bible, different understandings of gender. We align our daily lives with different priorities. We pray in different ways. Each year, once we're all seated around the table, I start our before meal prayer, and my aunt finishes it. And sitting around that table with these same people year after year, we experience a deep sense of belonging with one another. Reproductive rights activist Frances Kissling is both pro-choice and deeply Catholic. She spent most of her life seeking to build relationships with people she disagrees with profoundly. Kissling says that the pressure of coming to agreement works against really understanding each other. Instead, Kissling insists what we need is the courage to be vulnerable in front of those we passionately disagree with. For what we are seeking is not common ground, but common life. We play chicken tracks together while stuffed to capacity, slumped in our chairs between dinner and pie. We cried together the first time my grandma wasn't at the table with us. We mourn one another's disappointments and revel in one another's celebrations year after year. We find belonging with one another, different as we are, though the simple, tender experience of sharing a meal together. This reading is an excerpt by Jennifer Hope Choi from her essay, A Cooler Full of Gimbap. Choi recounts an experience of bringing her family's favorite dish, the Korean rice and seaweed roll gimbap, to school on International Day. Choi writes, "Even though I actually adored gimbap, I'd recently discovered that my peers did not. Just the sight of it disturbed them, which meant that liking it made me strange and different. I showed up to class wearing my petal pink hanbok, positively giddy, like I was performing a more Korean version of myself in a play. I set our platter on a table in the center of the room along 30 other family-made dishes. My grandmother had woken up very early that morning to prepare the gimbap for me. Still a Buddhist then, she handled every ingredient with quiet reverence. At school, one after another, we shimmied down the buffet line. My classmates sluiced gobs of ambrosia, mac and cheese, and tuna casserole onto their plates. But the gimbap sat undisturbed beside an equally unpopular knoll of beige sauerkraut. I didn't even get a pity sample from our teacher. I wondered if it was merely an issue of unflattering lighting until I caught a few kids grimacing at the rolls. And that's when I saw gimbap as they must have. Frankenfood. Unnatural pinks, the radishes highlighted yellow, the seaweeds coal black. It surprised me how quickly this tenderly made thing had warped into an object of repugnance. The way shame steals what we privately love in the face of public spectacle. After class, while waiting for my grandmother to pick me up, I devoured as many of those rainbow morsels as I could, as if disappearing them might also disappear my shame. Author Vivian Nunn writes, "Private cooking and public eating can be both emotionally and politically fraught performances that signal one's membership in various communities. One's national identity is neither static nor one-dimensional, but rather has to be personally claimed and performed through activities such as food preparation and consumption." Vivian Nunn recounts her own experience of leaving Puerto Rico to start a new life in Colorado in the fall of 1988. During her family's first week settling into their new home, Nunn stepped outside to find frozen turkey, a can of cranberry sauce, a box of stuffing, a box of instant mashed potatoes, and a few sweet potatoes and marshmallows as well. Nunn writes, "Nestled among the food items was an unsigned card wishing our family a happy Thanksgiving." She confesses, "Our first reaction was mixed. On the one hand, we were touched that others had reached out to us with such a welcoming gesture, while on the other hand, we felt embarrassed because we could afford to buy our own holiday meal, though turkey is not necessarily what would have graced our table since pork was more to our taste. My mother thawed the turkey," she writes, "and a day or so later we had our feast. We said grace over the meal and felt grateful that the Americans had welcomed us among them." Tina Ngo is programs manager of the organization Asian American Youth Empowerment. The child of immigrants, Ngo describes the food served in her household on Thanksgiving Day. "We typically have a Vietnamese noodle dish, such as bun ryu or bun mang, and order other dishes, Chinese roasted duck, dim sum, with mashed potatoes and green bean casserole. Each year on Thanksgiving, Ngo wondered if the food spread across her family's dining room table was a culinary expression of belonging in two cultures at once, or not quite belonging anywhere." Edna Lewis was a renowned and much beloved chef among culinary critics in her time. Lewis spent much of her career preserving Black Southern cooking and proving that it deserved the same dignity and attention given to French cuisine. Edna Lewis grew up in the 1930s and 40s in a town in Virginia that no longer exists. It was called Freetown. Lewis's grandparents, Chester and Lucinda Williams, had been among the founders of Freetown. After emancipation, they found a measure of land only a few miles from where they had lived while enslaved. Lewis's grandparents planted orchards, raised their own animals, fished and foraged, threshed their own wheat. At 17, Lewis moved to New York City, bringing her memories of working the land and cooking from its bounty with her. She worked a number of jobs before becoming the chef at a critically acclaimed New York City restaurant in 1948. She married a communist activist and joined the Communist Party herself. Literary stars of the day, Tennessee Williams and Truman Capote, among others, along with First Lady Eleanor Roosevelt, frequented her restaurant when they were in town. In the mid-1970s, Lewis wrote her first cookbook, still in print, called The Taste of Country Cooking. To prepare, she gathered her memories from childhood and read historic cookbooks to learn more about the cooking done by Black cooks in the past and how Native Americans ate. Lewis made clear that it was the foods first planted and cultivated by Native Americans and enslaved Africans, now cooked in restaurants and home kitchens alike, that were the origin of American cuisine itself. And Lewis pointed out that it was Black cooks who did most of the cooking in private homes, hotels, and on the railroads. When Lewis's book, The Taste of Country Cooking, was published, a fellow chef, Alice Waters, wrote, "Miss Lewis was able to suggest another way of eating, of being, one on a human scale, in harmony with the seasons and with our fellow man." She continues, "You feel all through her writing that she is giving thanks for something precious." Lewis made the case that American cuisine in general was a product of the farming techniques and muscle memory passed down by people like her grandparents. And she was determined that her recipes would honor the contributions of all the bodies American history tried to erase from the record. As her niece put it, she wanted to make their lives count. The taste of country cooking is organized by season. Recipes entitled Christmas Breakfast and a dinner of chicken and dumplings and warm gingerbread are organized under winter. Under fall, there's a recipe called Making Wine, Persimmon Beer, and Fall Preserves. But there's no menu for Thanksgiving dinner. When Lewis's editor asked in 1976, Ms. Lewis, why isn't there a menu for Thanksgiving dinner included? Lewis answered, growing up, we didn't celebrate Thanksgiving. We celebrated Emancipation Day. Thanksgiving was a holiday for people whom the United States embraced. Thanksgiving was a holiday that made no acknowledgement that the table was set with foods first planted and cultivated by Native Americans and enslaved Africans. People whose land and freedom were taken as the price of abundance for white Americans. Despite misgivings of how un-American it would appear to not include a Thanksgiving meal in a seasonal cookbook, Lewis won out, and her Emancipation Day dinner menu featured wild rice, green bean salad with sliced tomatoes, and guinea fowl. As Lewis explained, the guinea fowl has its origin in West Africa, and their African link was passed down generation to generation. Lewis wanted to be sure that when people with black and brown skin opened her cookbook, rather than being erased from its pages, they'd be able to taste belonging.
We'll build a love where we bind up the broken. We'll build a love where the captives go free, where the oil of gladness dissolves all our mourning. We'll build a promised love that can be. We'll build a love where we bring good tidings to all the afflicted and those who will mourn. We'll give them garlands instead of ashes. We'll build a love where peace is reborn. Oh, I'll build a love, come gather together, anointed for God, and create peace. Where justice shall flow down like the water, and peace, peace like an ever-flowing stream.
We'll build a love where those who go hungry are given the food that makes us so strong, restoring the balance to all of creation. Come build a love where all will belong. Oh, come build a love forever together, anointed by God, and create peace, where justice shall flow down like the water, and peace, peace like an ever-flowing stream.
praises resound from spirits once faint and once weak, where the oaks of righteousness stand her people. Come build the love, my people, we seek. Oh, come build the love, come gather together, anointed by God, and create peace, where justice shall flow down like the water, and peace, peace like an ever-flowing stream. Hallelujah, hallelujah, peace rolls down. Hallelujah, hallelujah, peace rolls down. Hallelujah, hallelujah, peace rolls down. Hallelujah, hallelujah, peace rolls
I invite you now to breathe a little more deeply with me, to arrive more fully in your body. Close your eyes if that feels right. Relax your shoulders and your jaw. Breathe deeply as I offer these words of meditation. The Sacred Hoop by Black Elk. Then I was standing on the highest mountain of them all, and round beneath me was the whole hoop of the world. And while I stood there, I saw more than I can tell, and I understood more than I saw. For I was seeing the sacred manner, the shape of all things of the Spirit, and the shapes as they must live together like one being. And I saw the sacred hoop of my people was one of many hoops that make one circle, wide as daylight and starlight. And in the center grew one mighty flowering tree to shelter all the children of one mother and one father. And I saw that it was holy. Amen.
I was asked to share my story and my life because I'm an immigrant to this country, and I want to share that with you. I am from a family of refugees. We came to this country as stateless people. My parents were Russian. They lived in Russia all their lives. My father was a German, of German extraction. He spoke German. He went to a German school. And my mother was strictly Russian. They lived in Leningrad, these days called St. Petersburg, and they were there during the siege of Leningrad. This was a 900-day siege where the Nazis surrounded the city, cut off the food supplies, food and fuel supplies, and so people were starving. My parents, fortunately, were able to escape the city and go by train to another part of Europe, which was in Poland, where they were captured by the Nazis. Well, fortunately, because my father was of German extraction, he spoke German, he was a mathematician, he was considered welcome in Germany. We lived in Germany through the war, through the end of the war, and at the end of the war, we were still stateless people. After the war was over, Germany was divided into several sectors. So it depended on which sector you lived in, whether or not they would deport you back to whence you came. In our case, that would have been Russia, which would have been devastating for us. My father made sure he lived in a place, in a sector that was controlled by a country that did not deport refugees. So we were very fortunate in that. And sorry, this is emotional for me. So my father applied to many different countries, including South Africa, for a job, and we finally ended up in the United States. And again, we were still stateless people in fear of being deported. I remember a story my father told me when I was a little girl and we were in Sears shopping for camping equipment. And my father shared with me how he was still afraid of being deported and sent back to Russia. That was the memory I had of how precarious our situation was. And when you're a kid, you don't pay attention to that sort of thing. But anyway, after many years, we were not deported and we were able to be naturalized citizens. So still at that time, in the 50s, there was the Cold War raging, and we couldn't really talk about our Russian heritage because it was not politically correct. We did the usual Thanksgiving dinner with everybody, well, in our immediate family, because it was just our immediate family. And we had the turkey and the cranberries, and everything was really nice. And we were accepted into the community, partly because we were Caucasian and looked like everybody else, or the mainstream. It was later when when the Cold War was more or less over, we were able to share our culture with others. And we did that at Easter time, when the Russians always had fabulous Easter feeds with the really tall sweet bread called kulich, and a spread that goes on it that tastes like cheesecake, sort of. And anyway, and it was, when I was a kid, you don't realize things. You don't realize how blessed you are. And later on, during Perestroika in the early 90s, we were able to find our relatives in Russia. And we talked to them many times. And my sister and I, whenever we talk to them, we still remember how blessed we are and grateful we are that we are citizens of the United States. And we hold that feeling in our hearts. not just in our words. So whatever you are grateful for, I hope you remember it in your heart every day, because there is much to be grateful for. Thanks for listening. Welcome to our guests. Welcome again to today's service. I'm Erica Blake, and I've been a member of this community for 4 years. I want to welcome any first-time visitors or returning guests who are with us today. We are so glad you found us. I encourage you to take a look at our website to see the full range of activities that we offer, which are still many in spite of the pandemic. If you'd like to learn more about this congregation, or if you're ready to become a member, reach out to our membership coordinator, Kelly Green. Her email is Kelly, Kelly, at UUCCharlotte.org. She will be happy to talk to you. I hope you'll be back with us next week.
I add my welcome to our guests as well. Again, I'm Eve Stevens, one of the ministers of this congregation. And I encourage you, if you want to learn more about the opportunities we have to engage with the life of this community, you can go to our website to sign up for our weekly e-newsletter, Currents. This afternoon at 2 p.m., we'll gather at Maple Walk Garden for a pie walk. Buy or bake a pie, you maybe still have time, and join us there for some live music and socially distanced enjoyment of the grounds. As a community, we join in celebrating with June Blotnick her 15th anniversary as the Executive Director of Clean Air Carolina, and applaud her tireless commitment to environmental justice in the larger community and within our congregation. Go, June, go. We hold in our prayers Paul Cuney and Don Nias as they mourn the death of Paul's mother. And we're sending love to Belinda Perry as her mother recovers from surgery. We hold in our hearts Tawana Wilson Allen and Manny Allen as Tawana recovers from a recent hospitalization. We're sending love to Julie Prentice as she recovers from an injury. And we are holding in our collective prayers all those of you who are experiencing financial hardship and instability as this pandemic continues. And I encourage you, if you are suffering financially due to this pandemic and you have a critical financial need, reach out to myself or to my colleague Jay. We would love to help you if we can with funds donated by our members from the UUCC Cares Fund. Please reach out. We are here to help.
Good morning. I'm Tom Nunnenkamp. Nearly 50 years ago, Bertha Fry, a devoted member of what was then the Unitarian Church of Charlotte, left a substantial bequest to our congregation in her will. our Minister Emeritus, Dr. Sidney Freeman, with the help of several financial professionals in the congregation, set up a perpetual fund, which has evolved into our Memorial Endowment Trust. The foresight of those leaders and the generosity of the membership, both past and present, has given us an endowment fund which has enabled the congregation to have monies for special projects above and beyond our annual operating budget. In this season of Thanksgiving, may we all look at how we can make a permanent, perpetual gift to this community of faith, hope, and love. Now, most of us will do this by naming the Memorial Endowment Trust as a beneficiary in our IRA or in a life insurance policy. Some may do it in their will or their personal trust. Now, if you have any questions, one of our trustees will be glad to answer them and talk to your personal financial professional if you wish. We are all the beneficiaries of the generosity of previous members. May we too be bold and plant a financial seed for a tree we may never sit under.
This congregation is a place where we support one another's spiritual growth while building community and sharing love and staying in the struggle for justice. Thank you for paying your pledges and making any additional contributions you can. Your generosity makes all that we do together worthwhile and possible. Be on the lookout in the coming days for a special message describing an exciting new way of contributing to the offering basket each week. Stay tuned, and again, thank you.
We know this Thanksgiving will be a Thanksgiving like no other. I hope each of you finds something that brings you joy, eat something delicious, and remember that we are committed to this journey of spiritual, societal, and environmental transformation together. You do not journey alone. Reach out when you need us, and take care.